We go through early round and late round linebacker prospects next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair.
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and welcome back to the second to last draft profile episode of the show. It's a sad day, but it just means that the draft is coming closer and closer. I can't wait for it to show up, but thank you all so much for tuning back in. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on any sort of podcast platform that you listen to, and you can access the show on the go. But today, we're going to be going through the linebacker prospects. It's a very interesting spot because I've said this before on the Mock Draft Monday episode. I'm a Bears fan. I love linebackers. I grew up with Lance Briggs and Brian Urlacher, and then my dad grew up with Otis Wilson and Mike Singletary. Like, there's so many great linebackers that we love watching, and that's why I love going through linebackers. I love watching the tape on the linebackers because that's why we're Bears fans, guys. That we all love defense, so that's why I'm excited to go through this. But first, before we get into the prospects, we have to talk about the rumors about one certain Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn is rumored that people were calling the Bears trying to trade for Robert Quinn. Obviously, right now, at the time of this recording, nothing has happened, but a lot of trades do happen during the draft, so that people can move up, people can move down. It's a very interesting time of year. But why would the Bears actually want to trade Robert Quinn? Because he's coming off of a great year, breaking the single season sack record for the Chicago Bears, the historic Chicago Bears. So it's a huge, huge feat for somebody to be able to do that. The year before he had 2 sacks, but then was able to rebound, just absolutely dominant performance from a sack numbers perspective. He also kind of showed to be a leader. But also, all those reasons are good reasons why you should trade him because he's at the highest peak. If you expect him to get another 20 sack season, that's maybe expecting a little bit too much out of him as a player. So to me, I think that he's at the highest point. So I like the idea of potentially trading him. Also, you add in that he's got a $17 million cap hit this year. Trading him would free up $4 million this year, which doesn't really matter anymore because the prime of free agency is already behind us. But also, you would save $18 million the following year. So we saw Ryan Poles already trade Khalil Mack to get some cap savings. And that's why I kind of like the idea. He's 32 years old. His final year is when he's 34, or he's 32 this year. Then his contract goes until he's 34. So to me, I like the idea of at least getting rid of him, seeing what you can at least get. I like him as a player, but we know that Ryan Poles wants to build something special. I don't think you're winning it all this year, or you're built to win it all this year, but I do think the Bears have a legit chance at building a true championship contender the following year with the amount of cap space that they have been compiling for next year. It's an exciting time to be a Bears fan, or next year will be even more exciting. But that's why I think that they might end up making a deal if the deal is at least good enough. Because if you trade him for a 6th or a 5th, then that might rub some Bears fans the wrong way. So I'd be hoping for a 3 since you had Mac for a 2, but we'll see. It all depends on what the market is. We'll see. Let me know what you guys think. If you think that he's going to be going for a higher pick, or would you even consider doing the deal? I always want to because I think that he's, as an edge rusher that wins with speed, I get nervous because as you get older, you start losing some of that speed. You start losing some of that burst. That's why I'm more, hey, let's just get rid of him. Let's trade him if we can. And if we can get something, awesome. And then the next year, I could see us going amazing. But if he stays, totally up for that as well. But let's get into the main crux of why we're having this conversation. Let's get into the linebackers. So before we get into, who exactly could the Bears be going after, I want to just talk about who the Bears have on this current roster. Because right now, You have obviously Roquan Smith. He is scheduled to be your middle linebacker. So we're moving from a 4-3, 3-4 to a 4-3. And even though that there's quote unquote more linebackers in this system, you do have more stand-up linebackers in the system, while in a 3-4, you more so have two stand-up linebackers, while your two guys are more edge rushers. And predominantly, people play in a nickel defense, which means that you only have two linebackers that are out there. So that's where we have Roquan Smith, and then the other person most likely to start next to him is Nicholas Morrow, the new free agent that we added in. Now, I like Nicholas Morrow as a pass coverage guy. I talked to some people from Raiders in Paradise, asked them a little bit about him. They really like him. They just said that he's always injured. So they never were able to actually truly see what Nicholas Morrow is all about because he's always been banged up. He's always been injured. But when he was healthy, he was a solid player. So, do the Bears really think that he's going to be that guy? Because he could be. It sounds like he could be if he is healthy. But let's be honest here, Bears fans. We didn't know who he was last year. we weren't probably going like, oh man, they got Nicholas Morrow on the Raiders. Dang. We weren't saying anything like that. We were more so looking at other players. Not saying he's bad, not trying to diminish anything, but just trying to get realistic that he is a solid player, but there's always room to kind of improve. But the Bears also added Noah Dawkins and also Matt Adams. Matt Adams, a very small scale linebacker from Indianapolis. He could slot in as more of that sub linebacker that really kind of comes in more so on running downs, or even Caleb Johnson. I'm looking at the depth chart right here. Some people actually have Caleb Johnson as a starter. I think that's a little bit bold, but it's still more of that competition. That position is still a little bit more up in the air, a more running protection type of guy that we don't necessarily have, I would say. But then other guys that we still have Ladarius Mack. We also have Joe Thomas, not the offensive lineman, but I really do think that we just need probably somebody at this linebacker position. So that's why we're going to go through the top, kind of go through the top three picks that we have, who could be there, and then the bottom three picks and who could be there as well. I think it's still an enigma. I know a lot of people that are connected to the Bears that are saying that the Bears are going to go defense early. And some Bears fans are just not going to like that. So that's why we're covering the defense today, and we're covering early round linebackers because there is a possibility that they could be going after some of these people, and we want to cover some of the names. So, just like the other episodes, let's go who's probably not going to be on the board. And now the biggest person is Devin Lloyd. So Devin Lloyd, he is definitely going to be going earlier than the Bears. He's the best linebacker that's out there. But there is a name that I just want to keep our eyes out for. Not considering him one of my five to look out for, just kind of cheating the system a little bit. But Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. Nakobe Dean was seen actually as the best linebacker prospect, but he keeps on dropping. Charles Davis, Peter Schrager. Peter Schrager is very, very well connected, and he doesn't even have Nakobe Dean in his first round anymore. This Nakobe Dean was, the way that I see him is kind of like a Roquan Smith light. You know, an off-brand Roquan Smith, a smaller scale linebacker, because a lot of people said Roquan was too small to play linebacker coming out. Nakobe Dean, though, is really small. He's under 6 feet tall. So a lot of people are saying he's just not big enough to be playing that position. He has some decent speed, just similar to Roquan Smith, so he can kind of go lateral, but that's kind of what I see him as. And he would be a pretty good person alongside Roquan Smith, having some dual Georgia linebackers. Just you won't have too much size. So a lot of people are questioning because he's a lot smaller. A lot of people are saying that he can't cover tight ends because in college, he really couldn't. At least Roquan Smith could really get there and really break up passes because he was a natural defender, a natural pass coverage guy. Nicoby Dean is a very, very smart, instinctual player, which you really like, but also really this year was kind of his best year. And this was also when he had one of the best D lines of probably all, one of the best collegiate D lines of all time with their crazy, absolute insane front up there. So did that help him out as well? Because he's just small and he can't necessarily shed off some of those blockers. But that's why he's dropping. So he could actually drop to the Chicago Bears because a lot of people are saying he's too small. He's not that big. But that's the big reason why you might see someone like this dropping down to the second round. A very talented player, but just a lot of questions on his overall size and frame as a linebacker. So Nicoby Dean out of Georgia. Keep that in mind. Now watch, he's probably going to go like 20 and he'll be like, okay, there he goes. But he is someone to at least like watch out for at the very beginning. Is he actually going to be gone? But he's also probably going to be a big name if he does end up falling to the second. You'll hear a lot of people talking about that during the draft. So let's actually go through 5 picks that would probably be definitely be around the Chicago Bears when they're picking in the second round. Now, do I think that they're going to be going with the linebacker in the second round? Most likely not. And also, I kind of hope not because I don't like some of these prospects that are out here. Spoiler alert. So the first one is Quay Walker out of Georgia. He's typically going from the consensus boards about 38.8 to 42, which is the exact range where the Bears' second round pick is. The Draft Network has him going 37th, but PFF has him going 70th overall. So PFF, not a big fan of him, but everywhere else, they're big fans of him. He's 6'4", 242. So unlike his fellow counterpart at Georgia, he is definitely more so the typical size that you would want out of an actual linebacker. He also does not miss tackles. He had the third best tackle percentage, so he only missed 4.3% of his tackles. Absolutely insane, absolutely incredible. And what's nice about this too is that when you are a good tackler, that always translates because if you can tackle in college, chances are that will also translate into the pros because it means that you're doing something right with your tackle ability and you just have the natural instincts to be able to make those tackles. So he gives you all the size, all the speed that you want, all the tackle ability. He's kind of got like that really nice base. But here's the cons. He's a 1-year starter, so a lot of people don't necessarily love that. He was kind of playing kind of an edge rusher type of role, but also he's really good in a man coverage scheme because he can really truly leverage his speed, his size against other people, like a tight end. So he's able to kind of match up a little bit better that way. But also, one thing that I don't love about him is I'm watching him and he seems like a safe player. But when I watch him, I don't get like a game wrecker vibe. Like when you see him, I don't think that we're going to be talking about, and this could bite me in the butt. When I watch his tape, I don't see him as a guy that's going to be that next level linebacker that's just, oh my God, they have Quay Walker. We got a game plan against him. He's going to be more like, oh yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good player. Because he didn't seem to like wreck people on tape or just kind of take over the game. Nakobe Dean was that linebacker that was really stealing headlines at Georgia, not necessarily Quay Walker. Still a good player, good NFL size, can tackle. That's why I think that he's a safer pick. But at the same time, too, I don't love him from the context of drafting him this high up in the draft. So moving on to the next player, we have a Christian Harris out of Alabama, still in that second round type of range, and he's typically going about 55 to 53. So kind of in that later second for the Chicago Bears, and he would probably be around that area. So he is 6'1", 235, but also some pros and cons about him. He started as a true freshman, so here we have an Alabama linebacker. Alabama linebackers always seem to be going high. He's started since he's been a true freshman. That's absolutely incredible, and what you love to see. He can do it absolutely everything. Alabama asked him to be a run stuffer, pass coverage, blitzer, whatever they asked for him to do it, he did it. So why is he going in the second? And the biggest reason is similar to like a Quay Walker. Christian Harris just doesn't wow people. And when you see him, you're like, well, he did everything that was asked of him, but he just didn't do it great. Like he just didn't do it that well. So that's why a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, you started for Alabama. You did everything they asked, but you got like a C- grade on everything that you were doing. So yet again, another player that I think can come in and have a decent floor, but I don't think his ceiling is necessarily there. There from just an overall player because he's not an incredible athlete. He's not an incredible like size guy too. So that's why to me, I'm just not in love with a Christian Harris. He could potentially, when we're talking about the Bears, he could come in and fill any role that we want. But I just want somebody that I like the high upside players, someone that has a higher ceiling. When you're just trying to do a rebuild, you're just trying to say, let's take some guys that can really kind of take us to the next level because we can just sign an average free agent or so. So I just don't see that ceiling of a Christian Harris. So let me know if you are more of a fan of Walker and Harris. Let me know why. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. Maybe I was watching the wrong games, but they just always seemed kind of okay. Not saying bad, but just more so okay. And I just would rather take somebody that has higher upside as a linebacker. That's just my personal preference. And speaking of high upside as a linebacker, now we're getting into that kind of third round range. This guy goes late in the second, so his average draft position is about 61. PFF has him at about 53, the Draft Network at about 60. So the consensus is actually at 60 though, and that is Chad Mumma, the linebacker out of Wyoming. If you listen to the show, we've talked about him so much. Came up in a lot of our mock drafts and actually dropped to the third round for a couple ones. But I really like him because he's got that high upside, like I was mentioning before, 6'3", 240. And also a lot of people are comparing him to Bobby Okereke. So another former linebacker for the Colts that was underneath the Eberflus tree. So he might be seeing Chad Mumma going, I really like this guy. He's got the speed. He's got the size. He was averaging about like 11 tackles a game, 5 run stops, like just a very, very good player. All of his athletic traits were in the top 75%. So absolute crazy athlete that you want. And what I like about him is when you watch him, he can be the guy. Like you can put him at middle linebacker, you can put him at weak side, whatever you want. He's got that upside because of his athletic ability, his vision. That's why I really like him as a player. But why is he going so late? Why is he dropping? Big reason, competition. He went to Wyoming. So he's not going against a lot of Power 5 schools, a lot of incredible teams. He's going against lesser competition, no offense. But that's why a lot of people are questioning how good is he actually. But also, I don't see as much pop or aggressiveness that I'd want to see out of a linebacker that's his size. So it doesn't seem like he's always in the piles, always kind of going after somebody. He's still very fast. He still makes big plays, but I just didn't see as much aggressiveness, as much pop as I would want to see out of a 240-pound guy. Like I said, all crazy upside. That's the reason why he's dropping. That's why he's not the perfect prospect. That's why he's not going in the first round. But still, he's got all the traits, all the athletic ability that you want out of a linebacker. And that's why I'm higher on him than, say, a Christian Harris or a Quay Walker, just because I think Mumma has a higher upside. But this next guy, we have not talked about him at all, pretty much. And that's Troy Anderson out of Montana State. He is a third round linebacker that the Bears could be getting. He's going around 73. The Draft Network has him going around 79, PFF about 65. So he's really more of that third round linebacker that the Bears could get. I really like the idea of getting him because we said that Mumma's a physical freak. This guy, Troy Anderson, is an even bigger freak. I'm pretty sure that I've heard some draft analysts say we haven't seen a linebacker this crazy athletic since Ryan Shazier when he came out and then he went over to the Steelers and then had his unfortunate injury. Troy Anderson is 6'4", 243, and he has a 4.42 40 time. Just an absolute freak of nature athletically. And also, he's also very new to this linebacker position. When he went to Montana State, in 2017, he was a running back. In 2018, he was a quarterback. Then in 2019, he was a running back / linebacker. 2020, they didn't even play. And then in 2021, he was an actual linebacker. So to me, he's a very, very raw linebacker prospect. Like there's some people that go high because of the pure raw athletic ability. That's what Troy Anderson is. A raw athlete, fairly new to the position, just insane burst. They do like the whole GPS tracking. He had the fastest acceleration time out of any linebacker at the Senior Bowl. that's going to turn some heads. That's going to turn Eberflus's head going, this guy is a freak of nature. We could get him in the third round. That would be absolutely insane. Some people said an unlimited potential linebacker, which just kind of gives you goosebumps if the Bears are able to get a player like this. It's an all potential type of guy, very, very, very high ceiling, very quick too. So just can play everything that you want from a physical perspective. I can't stress that enough. Watch the tape. You'll see just how incredible he is. And you see the change of direction that he had as a running back kind of translate to that linebacker position. But a couple other pieces too, from his perspective. He doesn't have a lot of pop. Yet again, similar to Mumma, you don't see that explosiveness. And you kind of see him not necessarily like wimp out. I can't think of a better word though for that than just doesn't play with a lot of aggression as at that linebacker position, but also to sometimes misdiagnoses some run plays. So kind of overcommits to some as well. So it has a lot to learn at that linebacker position, but still a very, very raw athlete. Anytime that you're going with somebody like a Troy Anderson, you get a little bit nervous because you're like, okay, is he just a really good feel-good story, a really good running back physical prospect that you're moving over to linebacker, or can he actually play linebacker? That's the big question, because he's kind of shown that you just need to, when you're competing against other people, you just need the numbers to kind of back it up. So last guy that we're kind of looking at out of these five is another guy that we talked about as a second rounder, but he's been dropping and dropping and dropping, and that's Brian Assamoa out of Oklahoma. Now, he's typically going at about 107, so definitely in the third round range. Some people they're saying you can even get him in the fourth round. But the Draft Network says he's going around 71, PFF about 64. So really another person to kind of target in that third round range. This guy is 6'1", 226, which is very similar measurables to a one Darius Leonard. He's a very crazy athlete, has the sideline to sideline speed, very good tackle rate. So he had the 27th best tackle percentage. So he only missed 7.4% of his tackles. A lot of other people are missing about 10% of the tackles at the linebacker position. So you're seeing a plus tackler, very aggressive. Like if you want an aggressive guy that's always going after people, this is what he does. He's skinny at 226, but he flies to the ball carrier and he really kind of brings this aggression and really a leader at that Oklahoma level. So I really like him in this third round range, really because you're getting somebody who is the leader of a defense. You're getting somebody who's got the athletic traits that you want, and he could just fly to the ball carrier. So that's why I'm a big fan of him. But yet again, the cons, thin, not really able to shed the blocks too well, but also too, with that aggressiveness comes over pursuing, going way too hard for it. Like if everybody's running to one side, usually he's running to that same side as well. So a lot of play fakes really kind of get him. So it's fair, but he just has a little bit to learn. And I do really like the idea of him pairing up with a Roquan Smith, and with it being a third round pick, you can still get your offensive lineman, your wide receiver, whatever you want in the first two. And then you can come back and pick up a player like this that can really kind of complement your linebacker rotation. So I like the idea of Brian Assamoa. Tell me what you think. If you think that there's a specific linebacker early that the Bears should be targeting. There's two that I didn't bring up that kind of go in the third round as well. That's Leo Chanal out of Wisconsin and Channing Tindall out of Georgia. Channing Tindall, very fast, sideline to sideline player, was a backup. And Leo Chanal is more of like a downhill thumper. More so, which the Bears could be getting for that sub linebacker position now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more. But really, I do think that there's some good linebacker talent in that kind of third round range. You don't have to go second round. That's why I kind of like the idea. Wait a little bit, take best player available with that third round pick, because there's going to be some talented people, and it all depends on how that board falls. But that's our early round ones, but let's kind of quickly go through some of the later round prospects. So there's kind of five big guys that I wanted to cover. There's so many linebackers that can go late, so I'm definitely missing some because I I'm only covering 5. Let me know your favorite ones, but I didn't cover Brandon Smith from Penn State. He's kind of going in this no pick land where the Bears don't have a pick in the 4th. So to me, I don't really think he's going to be available for the Bears. But I want to go over to Demarco Jackson out of Appalachian State. We've talked about him a lot of times with these mock drafts. 6'1", 234, 2-year starter, was really a run defender in 2019. And the reason why I like him is I think that he could be a special teamer, but also at Appalachian State, he was really seen as a run stuffer. So to me, he's somebody that can compete at that sub linebacker position if you are a really big fan of Nicholas Morrow. So Nicholas Morrow can still be the starter that we wanted him to, but now we have this run stuffing specialist that comes in when we need our true 4-3 defense. He also has the flexibility to play some coverage. I don't love his coverage skills, but he at least has some upside out there. Now, moving on to the next player, we have Jojo Doman out of Nebraska. This is a guy that a lot of people really love. Do I think he's a perfect fit for the Bears? Probably not, but I just want to bring him up because you might see him drop a little bit and you might see him really high up on some boards. So you might be going, I want this guy. But I don't love, this is the reason why I kind of cover 5 guys, because I'm not a huge fan of him for the Bears, because he's a guy that played majority of his snaps in the slot. So he had 129 times he lined up at the line of scrimmage. So lined up as a lineman. Then 428 of those snaps, he lined up as a slot player, and only 66 snaps he lined up as an actual linebacker, lined up in the actual box. He's 6'1", 239. He's a linebacker build, but he lines up in the slot. Now, some people might see that this is a pro. He's got great hips. He's got great kind of quickness. So a lot of people are saying he can be a slot player or be that kind of pass rusher, that Nicholas Morrow type of role, which the Bears, like we said, don't necessarily need. He could be a pass coverage specialist, but the only thing that gets you nervous is he ran a 4.6. That's not great. That's not great long speed. So you're not seeing him as a slot player, even though he played predominantly as a slot guy. But he's really more of a third down pass coverage specialist, and that's Jojo Doman out of Nebraska. Now we have 3 left. Number 3 is Tyrell Bernard out of Baylor. So I always like to kind of talk about somebody who is kind of like an off-brand version of another high-ranked player. I always think about Jalen Reagor and Darnell Mooney. You could get Jalen Reagor in the 2nd round, or Darnell Mooney is somebody who didn't have all the traits of Jalen Reagor coming out, but now you look at it and you go, I wish I would have had Darnell Mooney instead of Jalen Reagor. Tyrell Bernard, to me, is like an off-brand version of Brian Assamoa, where he's 6'1", 224, practically same physically. They're very good athletes, very good change of direction. He's a little bit more stockier, but still, like, he's just got smaller size, smaller arms, just didn't look as fluid on tape. Like I said, just an off-brand version of Assamoa that you could probably get in the 5th round. So someone to at least be on the lookout for, because he's got good upside, and yet again, another special teams type of contributor that you can get with the 5th round pick. Now we have 2 more left. The next one that I'm going to go through is someone that I've talked about a lot on this show, Damone Clark, the linebacker out of LSU. 6'3", 239. He's got the NFL size, but he's getting spinal fusion surgery. He's going to be out this year, so you're going to have to add him in a little bit later. Now, just as a reminder, keep in mind, too, this doesn't mean that he's going to be a perfect pick. This doesn't mean that he was a first rounder and then he got injured. He was really seen as a day 2 type of pick, so kind of a late 2nd, early 3rd type of range for a linebacker. So similar to like a Chad Mumma type of range and skill set. So this guy, though, he's got the size. He's got a 6.1% missed tackle rate, which is the 11th best in the NCAA. So a very sure-handed tackler. Was awarded the number 18 jersey for LSU, which means you're a good character on the field and off the field. He's got all these check boxes. Very good player, can play everywhere that you want. But why he was always kind of seen as a second rounder or a third rounder was because he doesn't have great burst. He doesn't have that great acceleration and change of direction like a lot of these other linebackers. He seems like he needs a head of steam to make some plays, so he really lacks that explosiveness that you want to see out of a linebacker. Plus, he's always an upright type of player. You see him and he's just he doesn't bend down, he doesn't get low, he doesn't leverage his leverage. So because of that, I get a little bit nervous too because of the spinal injury. That's probably going to make it just harder for him to get lower by having a spinal by having a spinal injury and a spinal surgery as well. So he could be somebody that drops to the 5th or 6th round, but honestly, some people might just say spinal injury, we're not going to mess with that, and he could definitely go undrafted and be an undrafted guy that someone like the Bears could take a flyer on and then just camp him out on IR for a year. We'll have to see. But the last prospect that I want to go through is Mike Rose out of Iowa State. This guy is someone that would be going in the 6th round. So a very late round guy that we're adding, 6'4", 245. Now this guy, all the boxes are checked from the size perspective. As you can imagine, 6'4", 245. He also has great short area burst for a guy this size. Very quick and agile for a linebacker. But the only thing that he really lacks is that long speed. If somebody's going to the side or he has to cover a running back in the flat, I don't think he's got the long speed to really keep up with that. So he could be somebody that's a really nice sub-package linebacker or even a special teams contributor. I also get a little bit nervous with a 16% missed tackle rate, which I don't love as well. But also, he seriously was a good leader for the Iowa State team as well. So to me, he checks some of the boxes. He's got some of the size. He could be a contributor for your team, but also in a zone system like the Bears will be most likely running. I like him a little bit more in that, so he doesn't have to actually just race down running backs, which he would be getting cooked on constantly. But if you have this big guy that has that short area quickness, just guard this area, I really like him in that type of a role. So he's somebody with some upside in the Chicago Bears system, and that's Mike Rose out of Iowa State. So, guys, we got to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for listening. This is the second to last one. Next episode is going to be all about the interior offensive linemen. And then, before you know it, the draft is already going to be here. So thank you all so much. And make sure to like and subscribe. And Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.